Welcome to Week in One, the show that helps you catch up with the top news stories and interviews featured on ENCA over the past 7 days. I'm Nomasonto Pooe. Let's look at some of the stories that made headlines this week. Dr Nandi Magudunas' appeal to have her arrest declared illegal is dismissed by the Free State High Court. A compromise is reached between e-hailing drivers and taxi associations in Soweto. Arson and vandalism at the University of Fortis in the Eastern Cape. And a kidnapped teen in Durban is reunited with his family. The Thabo Bester saga continues to make headlines. Earlier this week, Dr Nandi Magudunas' urgent court bid to have her arrest and legal proceedings set aside was dismissed with costs. Magudumana claims she was abducted by SAPS in Tanzania. ENCA senior reporter Magudunas has more.
During arguments last week, Dr Nandi Magudunas' legal team told the court her extradition was disguised as a deportation. However, lawyers representing the state insisted it was Tanzanian authorities who decided how Magudumana and Thabo Bester would leave the country. But Judge Philip Lopser found conflicting statements in the state's responding papers.
It cannot be, on the one hand, that Tanzania had decided to deport them, and on the other hand, that there was an agreement between the two countries that they should be deported.
Ultimately, the High Court ruled Magudumana agreed to return to South Africa.
In the present case, I have no hesitation in finding that the applicant was well aware at the time of her handing over of the charges that could be leveled against her upon her arrival in South Africa. I therefore find that the application cannot succeed. I make the following order. The application is dismissed with costs.
Home Affairs and the National Prosecuting Authority have welcomed the ruling.
From what we could gather from the utterances, we were expecting the case to go very high up. We'll still fight it up there. Remember, this, according to the way we heard the judge making a remark about it, is something that is also a technicality. On our side, we, as Home Affairs, did not go to Tanzania. We were called there. We were not party to this because right from the beginning, we were not involved in the matter. But the Tanzanians called us. They have declared them prohibited in Tanzania. They will never hand them to police or the army or any of their vehicles because that will be tantamount to a rendition. They can only hand them over to immigration officers. And immigration officers in the country are only in Home Affairs.
We have said it before in that once there is an investigative process underway, everything is a possibility. There's a possibility of more people being charged and there are charges. There's a possibility of some charges being added against the accused, but that will depend on the investigation that once it has been finalized.
All right, and there's no concern around whether this judgment will impact what unfolds in the Magistrates Court?
No, definitely not.
Magudumana is expected back in the Bloemfontein Magistrates Court on the 20th of June. Magudunas, Bloemfontein in the Free State.
Police are investigating the circumstances around the death of a senior SAPS official in the Free State. He's one of the investigators in the case of convicted Facebook rapist Thabo Bester. It's reported that the officer might have committed suicide, but police are yet to clarify what exactly happened. At the time of his death, he was the provincial head of organized crime in the Free State. Our senior reporter Magudunas brings us that story.
Moments ago, I was informed that there had been a death, that there was a possibility that one of the investigators in this Thabo Bester escape saga had passed away. At that point, I was still trying to confirm whether this was a shooting incident, whether this was a suicide, because the information I had at the time was confirmation that this particular police officer had shot and killed themselves at a police police station here in Bloemfontein. I also have been told that the police officer was also, in fact, in court this morning for that judgment in the urgent court bid by Dr. Nandi Magudunas. We do, though, have a statement that's recently been released by the South African Police's spokesperson, that is Athlenda Mate. I'm just going to read from it, Bradan. It says that the SAPS can confirm the death of one of the investigators into the Thabo Bester escape case. Circumstances surrounding the senior officer's death, who is also the provincial head of organized crime in the Free State province, remains the subject of a police investigation. The SAPS management wishes not to discuss the matter in the public domain at this early stage. In-house employee health and wellness experts, which include chaplains, have been dispatched to provide psychosocial services to the family and the colleagues of the deceased member. The National Commissioner of the SAPS, General Fani Masimula, has described the member as a hard-working, loyal and dedicated detective with 31 years of service. Over the years, he has proven himself to be a highly skilled detective with a wealth of experience and knowledge in the detective environment. His departure leaves a void in the SAPS detective environment, and that statement, of course, being signed off by Athlenda Mate, who is at the headquarters of the SAPS. At this point, as you can tell from the statement itself, being very scant in terms of the details surrounding this incident. But like I said, Bradan, from the sources that we have been speaking to, it does seem as though this may have been a suicide, as the officer did shoot and kill himself this afternoon, from what we understand, at a police station here in Bloemfontein. But of course, as you've also heard from the statement, that this was a senior member of the SAPS and in fact the provincial head of crime intelligence here in the Free State. So certainly a major loss for the SAPS services, but of course investigations ongoing into exactly the circumstances around this particular incident.
There's been a breakthrough in clashes between taxi drivers and e-hailing services in Soweto. Tension spilled over into violence at 2 Soweto malls in the past few days, with taxi operators allegedly torching Bolt and Uber cars. They accuse the e-hailing companies of stepping into their territories and stealing their customers. But now it seems there's a compromise. ENCA's Hadi Jokas has more.
Tensions remain high in Soweto after a number of Uber and Bolt cars were torched at 2 different malls. It's not yet clear who is behind the attacks, but the Soweto Ehailing Association has blamed local taxi operators. An urgent meeting with local government has not been able to provide a long-term solution. The Ehailing Association has put the blame squarely on government.
Many people within e-hailing are operating with a slip to prove that they've applied for a permit. But that permit has never come. And some of these slips are more than 5, 6, 7 years old, waiting for feedback from departments. Gauteng Department of Road and Transportation. They, at some stage, were under a moratorium. At some stage, they were trying to establish a proper permitting regime. We're told they are waiting for the law to be signed in. So again, it goes back to government to say, you need to regulate and put a permitting regime in place.
The local taxi association has washed its hands clean of the unrest. It refuses to take blame or responsibility for the attacks. But they want the e-hailing sector to be regulated or structured better because it's causing too much confusion in its current form.
Jabulani konke amamoli ngiyacabanga ukuthi mayezovula i-management yakhona thina siyaxhumana nawo sikhulume nayo yonke into nabo as i-rank esuke ngizothini as i-rank exposa kuleyo ndawo noma enelungelo kusebenza kuleyo ndawo noma kwakhe ama-rank siyaxhumana namamoli sikhombisana yonke into sizosebenzisana kanjani nani yonke into ngibuye ngize lapho abafowethu bagcine isigcino njengamanje abasasebenzi ngokuthi bamabhubha.
The Public Safety and Transport MMCs have now intervened and are calling for e-hailing drivers to adhere to the agreement until Friday.
As a public safety with JMPD and SAPS, We are going to the ground. Our undercover unit is already there now to check what is this third force, who's doing which, because both of them, no, we're not fighting, because Ehailing used an app, and the taxis, they've been operating. So now, that's why now the MC said that we have agreed that there's the establishment of the committee. All stakeholders, the Taxi Association, the Ehailing, ourselves were there as MMCs. And also you've got the CPFs, you've got the patroller that will be there, and you've got all the other NGOs. They even said the Soweto Parliament will be there. Then we're going to have another follow-up meeting now to ensure that now we put in systems in place.
Another meeting is scheduled for Friday. Heidi Jokos in Soweto.
Stay tuned to Week in One. After the break, we feature some of the big interviews done by our anchors this week. Welcome back to Week in One. I'm Nomasonto Pooe. Our shows were quick off the mark to get reaction on the breaking court story regarding Dr Nandi Magudunas, her application to have her deportation from Tanzania and her arrest declared unlawful has been dismissed by the court. Masego Ratlaga spoke to legal analyst Advocate Zola Majavu about what this means from a legal perspective.
What kind of immediate implications does this have for the trial that she faces?
Firstly, I do not answer to the title of advocate. I'm all right with Mr. Majavu. I'm a senior legal practitioner, not an analyst. But having said that, thank you for the opportunity. Firstly, it has no immediate bearing on the criminal trial that is impending. In fact, my view is that this application was, with respect, an exercise in futility, because at best, had she been successful, think about it practically, what was going to happen? Was she going to have to be sent back to Tanzania? Does that necessarily mean that the charges that she's facing in the country are of no consequence? Clearly, the answers to those questions are in the negative. So in terms of her immediate release, it simply means that she stays in custody until she decides to proceed with a formal bail application. It may well be there that if she discharges the onus that rests upon her, then she may be admitted to bail. Other than that, she stays in custody until the next court appearance. What are her options available to her? She may possibly take this matter on appeal if she feels so aggrieved or if she is so advised. But once again, the impact or the full import of what the outcome would be is not going to change the fact that she still has charges to face, which charges are unrelated to the manner in which she may have been deported or extradited. Assuming that she was brought into the country through unlawful means, she may have a civil remedy that she has to pursue in the civil court. But it cannot necessarily mean that if the court were to find that she was brought into the country unlawfully, she then walks off scot-free. The two processes are simply not intertwined.
Following the ongoing tensions between e-hailing drivers and taxi associations earlier this week, as well as last week, ENCA anchor Sally Burdett spoke to Vatugwa Mbelengwa, spokesperson for the E-Hailing Association.
Just for a point of clarity, we've heard from the Soweto E-Hailing Association. What is your relationship with them? Do you represent the national picture? Just so we understand how you fit into this conversation.
Yes, I carry a mandate to speak nationally on behalf of drivers. I am the chairperson and founder of the Public-Private Transport Association. We are on record on key issues at the Competition Commission, submissions on Parliament, and we've got a long track record of speaking on behalf of drivers in this industry.
All right, so when we've just heard from Tato Ramaila from the Soweto United E-Hailing Association, and he basically, he's really concerned about what's happening. Do you support what he has to say? Do you support his point of view? Or do you have a different picture?
Essentially, I think the blame sits with government for failing to intervene and regulate this industry. These disputes are not new, and I think it's irresponsible to carry out the blame game, because these attacks that are happening are South African trying to earn a living attacking each other because purely our government has failed to step in and regulate. Essentially, who we need to blame here is government for failing its people. This industry is going on a decade within South Africa. We have called for regulation for years. We have seen many cars seen satellite. These tensions are not new. our government, our leadership, our ministers are just simply not interested in intervening and correcting the situation.
Also, Heidi spoke to the chairman of the Soweto taxi service. He flatly denies that any of his members were involved in any of these attacks on Ubers and Bolts in Soweto. Do you believe him?
Yes, I certainly do. And I think only law enforcement has the mandate to disprove him. But he is clearly confident and certain that he is not endorsing this. And I think as well, I don't believe in feeding into the narrative that there's a battle between taxis and e-hailing. There's a failure of government to regulate industry. Technology is coming to the forefront. Commuters should have an option of who they choose to ride with. But we cannot have this new era of e-hailing undermining the traditional minibus taxi industry.
As part of a road special focus this week, they looked at the failing infrastructure challenges the country is facing. ENCA anchor Tumelo Mthutwane wanted to know how this is affecting the freight industry. She spoke to Road Freight Association CEO Gavin Kelly for more on this.
The significant and direct impact on the economy, on consumers, on businesses due to a lack of road maintenances. I mean, what does it look like?
I think one needs to take a step back and look at the country at large in terms of what bad roads does to the country. So the first thing, there's obviously road safety, and especially in the rainy season, if you've got potholes or pieces of the road that are not in good condition, then there's a bit of swerving out or you fall into these potholes. And of course, there's then road safety issues. People can be injured, they can be killed, and that's a problem. The second thing is damage to vehicles, whether it's trucks or it's light motor vehicles or buses, doesn't matter. For us, it's about trucks. So those are tires, they're wheels, and tires went up incredibly last year. And we're still struggling with that sort of increase into our operational costs. So it's maintenance of the vehicles, it's ensuring that the lights and the reflectors and the couplings and the hoses all stay in good condition, because you keep hitting potholes or driving along roads that are on bad repair. Then there is a huge impact on the efficiency of freight. So you might have to use a different route. It might take you longer to get there because of the road. So therefore you need to put another vehicle in. And that all of these things I've mentioned then have as they say, a northwards force or an increase in terms of the cost of logistics. So we start paying more for goods, and we pay more for transport, whether it's a bus or a taxi, because the operators need to look after their vehicles and keep everyone safe in terms of that. And then, of course, the final thing is, and if you look at the visuals now, our infrastructure is crumbling. We don't seem to be able to address matters when they present themselves the first time round. We seem to only get there when it's really bad, and then we've got to start rebuilding roads, not just repairing them or maintaining them. And that has a huge impact on infrastructure, both financial budgets in terms of that and in terms of where we find it as an economy at large.
Stay tuned to Week in One. Coming up, a look at more top stories. Welcome back to Week in One. I'm Nomasonto Pooe. Fort Hare University management says it has it on good authority that political motives are behind the arson and vandalism at the institution's Alice campus. 13 suspects appeared in court facing arson and malicious damage to property charges. ENCA's Ronald Masinda has more.
Some students at the University of Fortis say that management in the institution is unreasonable. They claim that they have not been given enough time for exams. Some spoke to ENCA on condition of anonymity.
Students ezihlala kwi-private accommodations, suppose zibhatala i-rent, but azikabhatali rent till now because imali ka-nandrez ayifakwa apha esikolweni. 2, indaba yama-appeals. Kudala abantwana ba-appeala nesifas, abanye ba-rejectwa but akho sizathu but aziphendula till now. 3, indaba ye-allowance yabantwana aba-funded but abafumani imali. Indaba ye-timetable too congested. Umzekelo, I'm one of the students as affected le ndaba ye-timetable.
Others say funding issues and the appalling living conditions are why some students are unhappy.
You can never allow students to study for exam whereas windows zabo are covered with cardboards. Most residents up uses cold showers, even in the morning. Imagine waking up at 8 and you have to use a cold shower. I-Wi-Fi yalapha esikolweni disappeared last week for the whole week, whereas bebeyibiza ngoba si-study week.
But the tertiary institution has refuted these claims. They say students were issued exam timetables a long time ago and that the incident that took place in the institution on Sunday night was uncalled for.
The issue around the alleged congested timetable, it wasn't registered by the forum that represents students, or the majority of students, the SRC. So that's why we're saying we're keeping an open mind to what really happened here on the Alice campus.
Management says exams will continue according to plan. Ronald Masinda, Alice.
Action SA says Durban might suffer the same fate as Hammanskraal, as the eThekwini municipality has failed to fix its sewage system. The party says the municipality is not prioritizing repairs to infrastructure, despite the allocation of 1.5 billion rands towards flood damage. The party has filed papers in the Durban High Court against the Metro. ENCA's Letu Mdluli reports.
According to Action SA, eThekwini municipality claims that 95% of the sewerage infrastructure has been fixed. But the party says these are lies, as they've been visiting various areas that look like this. Last year, Action SA approached the High Court in Durban in an effort to compel government entities tasked with resolving the sewer crisis in the metro to act with urgency.
They didn't have a plan, which was shocking to us because all this time they said they had a plan. It's really a concern because we've seen this outbreak starting in Tshwane, now in Free State, and then we worried that this might even come to eThekwini because as you see here, this is a raw sewer going down to the rivers, to our beaches.
National Treasury allocated 1.5 billion rand to eThekwini municipality towards rebuilding after the floods. But Action SA says that the city has only put aside 220 million rand to water and sanitation, which isn't enough.
220 million is allocated to water and sanitation. Now that's very broad because it means then one need to go drill and drill the plan. How much actually is allocated to sewer alone? But it's a concern that it took the city so long to provide us with just a piece of paper to tell us how they plan to fix this problem.
The party says it's forging ahead with the court matter, even though the city has asked to resolve the matter out of court.
Well, now our legal team will start preparing a replying affidavit, but we are going to hear from the other respondents, some of which are cooperating with us. We're going to hear from them whether they wish to supplement their papers first in their answering affidavits, and then we will prepare a comprehensive reply to the action plan. We can't let this carry on. There can be a plan and there can be money, but where's it going? So we're going to have to continue with the court proceedings.
Action SA took us to Kenville in Durban, where sewage has been running like this for over 2 years. Residents say they are afraid to drink the water and are concerned for their health.
We don't drink the drinking water. We've been buying water for the last from the lockdown here time. So drinking water here is not good. A lot of people got sick.
We reached out to the eThekwini municipality, but officials declined to comment, saying this is an ongoing court case. Letu Mdluli, Durban.
And finally, some good news. A Pietermaritzburg teenager who was kidnapped last month has been found. The Hawks and private security companies located him at a house in the KZN South Coast. ENCA's Jason Thathia was on the ground as the story unfolded.
Just talk to me about the emotions you are feeling at the moment as you see him walk up the driveway and go to your home.
No, I think it is a very exciting time, and we should thank Colonel Maestri and his team, and also RZS Security, that they brought my brother home, and we were very excited and very thankful of them. Yeah.
Do we have any idea why anyone would want to take your brother?
No, I think it was just crime and kidnapping. You know, the normal kidnapping that takes place, and yeah, I think it was just crime and people asking for ransom and everything. Yeah, it was a normal kidnapping that happened.
And did the family have to pay anything to the kidnappers to free him?
No, thankfully to obviously Colonel Maestri and his team, we didn't have to pay anything, and yeah, we got the boy home safe, sound.
What were they saying to you as the family during this time? I mean, surely they would have been saying that they wanted money and how much they wanted and maybe why. Was anyone communicating with the family?
Yeah, my mom was communicating with obviously the kidnappers, because the kidnappers were phoning my mom. And they wanted obviously ransom money. And yeah, that's it.
Was that about 11 million they were asking?
11.5 million they were asking for.
And that is the end of this weekend's edition of Week in One. From myself and the team, have a great weekend.